Breaking news now on Fox News Channel. The head of CENTCOM, General John Abizaid, now going to the White House for a meeting with President Bush. This meeting previously unscheduled, and it comes as President Bush acknowledged today he needs to talk to commanders to determine whether the United States needs to change its tactics in Iraq. Some say. It has been widely said that we need a total shift in U.S. foreign policy, a more balanced approach using diplomacy and the threat of force instead of a regime change. One of those people is Joe Cirincione. He's the Senior Vice President for National Security at the Center for American Progress. Joe, at the risk of sounding like O'Reilly, what say you?
Well, we've tried regime change, and it's proved to be a very costly in both lives and money and counterproductive policy. It's backfired. Every single member of the axis of evil is more dangerous to the United States today than it was 5 years ago. You see the news from Iraq. It's not good. This week, I think, we will look back on as the week where expert and public opinion finally synced in with political and military opinion. It's clear now that we're going to have to change course in Iraq. It's just a matter of when and how we do it.
Well, now just say, I have heard that from every guest that we bring in here for weeks and weeks and weeks. But nobody then goes to the next sentence, which is, what do you do? I want some sort of someone somewhere to say, let's try this. And I haven't heard it.
Well, I think there's a lot of consensus about what you do, and it begins with announcing troop withdrawals from Iraq. Not precipitously, not all at once, not cut and run, but a staged, careful plan that keeps our troops safe, but puts pressure on the Iraqi political forces.
You know, that White House has been mighty clear that it's not going to announce any withdrawals. That would be like turning the Titanic.
This may be beyond the ability of President Bush to control anymore. This is what you're seeing this week, this coming together of both the liberals and the conservatives, a lot of senior Democrats and Republicans. I know it's political season. I know that you've got sharp debate. But underneath that, you can see people like John Warner and Carl Levin in fundamental agreement. You can see our military leaders now in fundamental agreement. This isn't working. And when you have somebody like former Secretary of State Baker saying that victory is not really what we're going to be able to achieve in Iraq, that has changed the whole dynamic. I don't care who wins in November. I know that in November and December of the end of this year, we're going to see a change of course. We're going to see a new strategy develop. It's part of it. It's going to be military, bringing the troops home, but a lot of it's going to be political in Iraq and diplomatic in the region, changing our relations with a lot of those countries, accepting that we finally have to talk to Syria, we have to talk to Iran to bring them into a regional peace solution.
You're suggesting the kinds of changes that are, quite frankly, unthinkable under President George W. Bush. He could not. If there is anything that people on both sides of the aisle can agree on, I'm guessing, is that if President Bush says he's going to do it, he does it. I mean, there's never been an example of anything that he said he was going to do that he didn't do. Are you saying that he cannot, therefore he will not?
I'm saying that we really don't have a choice here. Staying in Iraq under the current course is not a choice any longer. It's not going to work. Let me give you another example where I think we're going to change. North Korea. There's been a lot of people in the administration who wanted to crush that regime for understandable reasons. It's not going to work. We have to forget the idea that we can overthrow these regimes and work more like we did with Libya to change the regime's behavior. You're reporting at the top of this hour some breakthroughs in that situation where Kim Jong-il is backing off. It's a direct success for U.S. policy. We have to recognize that this more pragmatic approach, where we apply force and diplomacy, can achieve the kinds of results we want if we're willing to make a deal, if we're willing to, in the end, like we did with Muammar Gaddafi, say you can stay as long as you give up your nuclear weapons. I think we can get that kind of deal with Kim Jong-il, and I think this president can do it.
You were quoting leave without victory. That sounds like a real nice way of saying losing. And I'm curious what a loss would do, not just to the United States, but to the whole world. Couldn't that create a sense of instability worldwide that might be really untenable?
There are some very terrible policy choices we have to make. And the fact that we have to make them is a result of the failure to make the right choice in the last few years. We're in this situation now. None of us want to be here. We all have to work together to try to get out. Yes, there are risks in pulling back, and that's why it has to be managed carefully. But the risks are worse for staying. The antagonism that we've generated is already there. The isolation of the U.S. is already there. The weakening of our military by what's happened to them in Iraq is already there. We can't keep this course on. There's got to be a change. It has to be managed as carefully as possible to minimize the damage, to minimize the kind of diplomatic scenarios you lay out. That's why it'd be very dangerous to leave the entire region. We have to redeploy our forces, keep them in region, but just get them out of Iraq in a careful and planned way over the next year or so.
Joe Cirincione, good of you to be here. Thank you, Joe.
My pleasure. Thank you, Shepard.
All right.